Hey guys, tonight we're going to wander far back in time, into a world lit not by glowing screens and LED bulbs, but by a flicker of flame that could vanish with the wrong sneeze. We're visiting a medieval monastery, and yes, you're about to become an honorary monk for the evening. Don't worry, no vows required, except maybe the vow not to eat snacks too loudly while listening. Spoiler alert, you probably wouldn't survive this lifestyle. The lack of coffee alone would do you in, if not the icy draft seeping through every stone wall. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me in the comments where you are right now and what time it is for you, though beware. If it's already 2 in the morning, you're basically living the monastic dream schedule. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The air in your chest feels cooler as you step through the cloister gate. It's evening the hour, when shadows stretch across stone courtyards. When the chapel bells mark the end of work and the beginning of prayer, the place feels quiet, except for the crunchy gravel underfoot and the distant sound of sandals slapping the worn flagstones. If monasteries had neighborhood watch signs, they'd say something like, warning, silence patrolled hourly by monks in cowls. The monastery tonight is small, more of a community fortress than anything lavish. Squared stone walls rise around you with modest determination, streaked with dampness. Towering pines lean over the walls, as though eavesdropping, and every breath carries the aroma of bread cooling somewhere in the kitchen. You probably imagine monks eating soft loaves all day, but don't be fooled, their menus were about as thrilling as boiled lentils. Exciting food was for the next century's kings. Here, excitement comes from watching a candle drip. Speaking of candles, you don't fully realize it yet, but these monks have weaponized wax. Forget clocks ticking prettily on mantles. They don't exist here. Sunset, prayer bells, a rooster's stubborn crow, and beeswax drips, those are your timepieces. Picture monks pausing every so often to glance at a slightly lopsided candle. They tilt their heads, nod, and decide, yes, it is definitely the third psalm hour, as though the candle is whispering in secret monk code. The soundscape is already anchoring you into their rhythms. Faint chanting rolls like a tide from the chapel. A dog barks beyond the wall, then quiets himself, as though reminded of his vow of paused silence. The air smells of hay and slightly burned honey. That's the beeswax doing its nighttime duty. You walk toward the chapel, but the heavy oak doors resist your curiosity. Before there's prayer, the bell rings a deep, weighted sound, followed by a hush across the courtyard. Everyone knows, prayer time is every time. It's a rhythm of surrender, but also of clever calculation, without looking up at the starry heavens. They still know how many verses fit before wax melts another inch. Here, the monastery is both clock and cocoon. Inside, brothers kneel on wooden benches, smoothed by centuries of restless knees. A candle glows in a hand-carved holder, and everything you see is tinged in amber shadow. With each slow drift of the flame, walls seem to breathe. You could swear you see monsters in the shadows, except, you remind yourself, you're in a monastery. The scariest thing here is probably running out of beans for soup. This practice of wax steaming is a historical fact. Some monasteries in the 12th and 13th century literally measured time by candles marked with horizontal lines. As each layer of wax vanished, monks knew that about 1 hour had passed. Sometimes they combined this with chimes or a watchful brother's announcement, a practical solution in a world where the cocky rooster was simply too unreliable. But even monks had quirks. Historians note that in some abbeys, these candles weren't just clocks, they were spiritual props. A candle's steady melt was a meditation on the fleeting nature of life. Imagine your boss today telling you your deadline is whenever your scented candle finishes. Productivity might plummet, but at least the office would smell like lavender. Asterisk. And yet, here comes the open debate. Historians still wonder how precise these candles really were. Wax consistency varied, drafts meddled, wicks smoked too high, or sank pitifully low. Could monks actually keep exact time? Some scholars suggest the system was casual at best, more symbolic than scientific. Which makes sense after all. If your bedtime depended on an obedient flame, you'd probably nap through half your vows. Asterisk still, it worked often enough. The monastery was organized, prayerful, and quite a bit steadier than the average village outside its walls. Tonight, your night is swallowed by flickering light. The candle becomes hypnotic. It's just you, some hooded companions, and a flame wrapping stone walls in gold. Asterisk, you lean back against the cool stone, and an odd peace washes over you. The monastery doesn't care for your deadlines or your grocery lists. Here, the only urgency is the pace of burning wax. While modern life shouts, 5 minutes late for your email reply, medieval monastic life whispers, ah yes, wax melted one notch, it is time to chant again. Asterisk, maybe historians will keep arguing about their accuracy forever. But tonight, your content. You know what time it is, not 8:47 p.m. sharp, but the hour when stillness melts. One drip at a time. This is your hour now, soft and flickering. You slip away from the chapel's hush, padding across the cloister stones toward a low, smoky building that smells faintly of honey and singed wick. This is where the monks turn sticky comb into something holy, orderly, and faintly hypnotic. It's the candle workshop, a place where time itself is melted, poured, and shaped. Asterisk inside. It's warm. Not cozy living room warm, but the kind of warm where fire competes with damp walls, and smoke curls across beams like lazy vines. The monks hum softly as they work, voices muffled but steady. Vats of simmering beeswax bubble away, releasing steam that carries the faint sweetness of wildflowers. One monk stirs with the patience of someone who has spent 30 years learning to do one thing, calmly an act that today would count as extreme mindfulness content. Asterisk. You stand there absolutely transfixed. How is this lump of yellow goo going to tell the hour? The monk dips a long, thin wick into the vat, then lifts it slowly, watching golden wax coat the thread in delicate layers. He hangs the wick across a wooden rod to cool. Then he dips again, and again. Each coat builds thickness, until eventually the string is no longer a string, but a cylinder of pale gold. The air smells like a farmyard blended with a pastry shop, honeycomb mixed with smoke. Sheep wool lingering in someone's tunic. Asterisk, the flicker of fire makes the workshop glow, though the walls betray streaks of soot. Your eyes trace shelves lined with finished candles long, tall pillars, some banded with tiny ink marks all the way down their sides. These notches aren't decoration. They are deadlines, the measured increments of hours, ready to vanish into air. Each section is like a little sandbag of time. One burns away, another begins. Asterisk, and here comes your delightful historical fact. In certain monasteries of England and France, monks explicitly inscribed candles with marks designating intervals of about 15 to 20 minutes. When a mark reached the holder, it signaled a new prayer, a psalm, or even the time to wake fellow brothers in the night. An unassuming candle became not just a light, but a referee of eternity. Asterisk, of course, not all candles were fancy beeswax. Some monasteries had to make do with tallow melted animal fat. That option left the room smelling less like soothing honey and more like yesterday's stew, reheated one too many times. Beeswax was treasured precisely because it offered clean, bright light, and, as some chroniclers wrote, a sweet savor, pleasing to God. You'd probably argue with the godliness of a sputtering tallow candle at 3 a.m. Still, Wax wasn't just about prayer. These were literal building blocks of monastic schedules. Rows of candles lit simultaneously could mark longer stretches, ready-made counters for fast or feast. Monks didn't say, "Our meeting is at 9 o'clock sharp." They said, "When the wax reaches the third line, bring the bread and cheese." It's luxurious in its own humble way, like the medieval cousin of your oven timer beeping to tell you your cookies are done. Asterisk, as you stand in the workshop, your imagination drifts. You picture a tired monk marking one more line along a candle, muttering, "There, another hour invented." He probably never thought that, 1,000 years later, someone would lie in bed, earbuds in, drifting to sleep, with his invention acting as background story. Somewhere in the history of human napping, he should get credit. Asterisk still, historians puzzle about the precision. Did they really know whether a candle burned evenly? Ambient temperature mattered. Drafts messed things up. Uneven wax composition meant one candle might gallop through its length while another practically napped mid-burn. Some argue that candles were less about exact timekeeping and more about rhythm and routine. After all, who needs scientific accuracy when the goal is simply aligning chance with the stars? Asterisk, you glance back toward the monks, their quiet routine continuing without urgency. The wax hardens. The vats simmer. The rods fill with pale tapers that will soon be stacked like time logs against the wall. Every movement feels like a meditation on patience. The world outside might be full of bustling merchants and mud-splashed peasants, but in here the seconds are tender drops of wax, hardening slowly into hours. Asterisk. The workshop deepens that sense of steady ritual that defines the monastery. Nothing is rushed. The monks hum their chants, occasionally adjust their hoods, and sometimes just watch the melting pot as if it's the world's slowest and most meaningful cooking show. You lean against a cool stone ledge and realize this is less about keeping time, more about shaping time. They don't just live asterisk in asterisk the hours. They craft them, pour them, mark them, and let them melt away. Asterisk, your eyes follow another candle being lifted from its final dip, the pale cylinder shining faintly with softness. The monk sets it down gently, as if placing a newborn chick onto straw. And just like that, another portion of the monastery's tomorrow is created. Tomorrow is already waiting in a candle. Asterisk, for a moment, you close your eyes. You hear the crackle of firewood under the vat. You inhale the faint sweetness of wax, and in the stillness, your heartbeat begins to match the unhurried pace of the room. It feels as though time itself has slowed its stride to walk alongside you, at a monk's pace, barefoot, steady, humble, and slightly sticky with beeswax. The candles cool in their wooden racks, lined up in rows like a battalion of sleepy soldiers, each one destined not to illuminate a party or a royal procession, but to quietly tick away the ordinary hours of monastic life. You find yourself staring at one in particular, a tall beeswax taper, creamy and smooth, with neat little markings scratched along its side. It looks a little like a ruler, though instead of centimeters, it counts sighs, prayers, and stern reminders that bedtime comes much earlier here than in your world. Asterisk. This is your first real moment of initiation into the strange practice of candle clocks. The secret lies in those carved lines. Each notch down the body of the candle represents a certain passage of time, roughly an hour. As the wax melts away and the flame sinks lower, each line disappears into a puddle of spent light. Imagine holding a birthday candle and announcing, "When this melts halfway down, I'll take out the laundry." Not very scientific, but beautifully inevitable. Asterisk. The monks, however, had practiced this art for centuries. More than a few historians agree these candle clocks were not just functional, but symbolic. The idea of time vanishing, quite literally into thin air, suited men whose daily focus was on the fleeting nature of earthly existence. With every inch of wax consumed, they could meditate on the story of life burning short. you might find it gloomy, but in their world, a dripping candle knew the secret. The less wax left, the closer you are to heaven, or, optimistically, at least to another meal of lentils. Asterisk, you draw closer to the candle. The air grows warmer as you step into its glow. The flame wavers on its own invisible breath. Rhythms of hot and cool air dancing as living walls of stone channel breezes through narrow slits. Beads of melted wax run sideways like tiny explorers in search of the floor. Drip, drip, soft plashes turn time into music, measured not in ticks, but in sticky little sighs. Asterisk, there's something comically steady about it, as if this whole monastery runs on nothing more elaborate than the patience of fire. One monk nods approvingly at the candle's behavior, utterly confident in its reliability. You half expect him to say, "Yes, this is scientifically precise," though you know, deep down, it's closer to it, close enough. The candle is less a Swiss watch, and more the medieval equivalent of squinting at the sunset and saying, "Looks like about dinner time." Asterisk still, monks didn't stop at marking lines. Historical accounts describe candles embedded with little weights or nails. As the wax melted, the falling metal would drop with a clink onto a plate below. Instant alarm, a medieval ding, to signal the next prayer. Imagine if your smartphone alarm softly melted away before tossing a nail onto your nightstand. It wouldn't sell well today, but in its time, the system had flair. Asterisk, a fun little fact you'd never suspect. These candles, sometimes as much as 12 inches tall, might burn for about 4 hours, each line marking a slice of time long enough for chanting psalms. Longer ones could extend into the night, providing both comfort and the suspicion that maybe, just maybe, the psalm chanting was lasting way too long. Historians still wonder how uniform these practices were. Did every monastery have a standard hour candle, or did each abbey just improvise? Was Brother Geoffrey's wax burning faster than Brother Thomas's, leaving one chapel running 30 minutes early and the other still napping? Asterisk, this uncertainty, amusingly enough, troubles the precise-minded historians much more than it troubled the monks themselves. The brothers weren't CEOs, convening punctual board meetings. They were communities in rhythm with prayer, seasons, and fields. As long as there was some trustworthy way to divide the day, all was well. Nobody stormed into the abbot's chamber saying, "Excuse me, sir, but we've lost 15 minutes, according to the royal wax standard of 1207. Asterisk, the smell in the air shifts as another candle is lit nearby. Layers of beeswax soft sweetness weave together with the faint grit of stone dust on the walls and the clatter of sandals. It's not hard to picture the entire monastery at night glowing with nothing but these stubborn flames, each one doubling as both lamp and clock. Imagine walking to the refectory for bread, while casually checking the candle by the doorway. 2 notches gone, one left nearly bedtime. It's cozy in the simplest, most analog possible sense. Asterisk, you rest your hand on the stone sill, watching as the candle beside you slowly shortens itself. This, you realize, is the true draw of the practice. Unlike your digital clock that screams numbers at you, this whisper of fire forces patience. Nothing hurries. Time disappears slowly, like honey dripping from a spoon. Asterisk, and here's the quirk. Candle time didn't just exist in monasteries. In households of some merchants, wealthier enough to afford beeswax, candles marked periods for business negotiations or visits. Legend has it, some would simply declare, "Stay until the candle burns down this line." You can think of it as early medievals, except instead of a timer buzzer, you just hoped the flame didn't sputter out too early and ruin your pitch. Asterisk. So, here you stand, both witness and participant in the monastery's hourglass of flame. No tick-tock, no glowing numbers, just a miniature pillar devoured by patience. Were they really timed to the minute? Almost certainly not. Does it matter? Absolutely not, because the candle's true gift is rhythm. It tells you, softly, and with a golden flicker, that it is time to move, or time to stop, or time to listen to silence once again. Asterisk, your eyes drift. The flame blurs wax, warmth, prayer, and still, the notch creeps lower. A reminder, gentle but unmistakable, of time sighing by. The monastery feels different now. The candles have been poured, marked, and placed in their brass holders. The real show begins. Watching how the monks themselves bend their entire lives around these pools of slow fire. You trail behind them through stone corridors cool with evening air, and notice that their entire rhythm, every step, every breath feels designed to match the pace of melting wax. Asterisk, you end up in the refectory first. Long wooden tables stretch across the room, polished unconsciously by sleeves and elbows over centuries of meals. At the center, a tall candle stands proudly like the hall's master of ceremonies. Forget gongs and dinner bells. This glowing stick of time is all they need. The monks sit on benches, bowls waiting in neat rows. As the wax burns, the meal begins. The food is simple, often a thin broth, or perhaps bread dunked in something vaguely resembling cheese. The monks chew quietly. Everyone is so subdued that the candle practically crackles louder than the diners. It feels like an unhurried picnic hosted by time itself. Asterisk, this is your first true glimpse into monastic structure, constant cycles. A monk's day is not morning, afternoon, evening. It's 7 or 8 segments carved neatly like grooves into existence. Each one assigned prayers, chores, or meals. These periods are known as the canonical hours. Sounds fancy, yes, but really it's just candle burner slang for when the wax line tells us it's time to chant. It's efficient in its own quiet way. Asterisk, you notice that none of the monks needs to be reminded to stand or move. The candle pacing them whispers all the cues. A notch vanishes. The bowls are set aside. Another inch melts. They rise for prayers. And once bedtime draws near, the candle's drooping wick carries its own subtle last call announcement. Historians note that this rhythm brought remarkable stability, while peasants outside negotiated seasons in sunlight. Monks lived in wax-lit choreography inside stone walls. Asterisk, of course, not everything went smoothly. Imagine the occasional draft, sweeping through the hall and speeding up the flame. Suddenly, bedtime arrives half an hour early. Somewhere, a monk scratches his head, thinking, strange. I thought we had time for another psalm, and yet, they adapt with extraordinary calm. That's the beauty. Here precision was less important than steadiness. Life guided by a candle will never match the crispness of quartz, but it will match the heartbeat of patience. Asterisk, the next stop is the fields. Yes, even holy men got their hands dirty. Monastic gardens stretch around the walls, filled with herbs, onions, and rows of barley bending in the dusk light. You join the monks in weeding, though your idea of farming is more like scrolling apps about avocado toast. Here, hands press soil, chants hum like bees, and once again, the candle rules only. This one remains tucked inside the workshop. Monks know exactly how much gardening can be done before the next wax interval demands prayer. It turns toil into rhythm. Asterisk, the fact sits comfortably here. Monastic life was in constant prayer alone. Records show that monasteries farmed, brewed ale, fed travelers, and sometimes even served as hospitals. The candle time system didn't just keep monks praying on schedule, it ensured gardens thrived. Meals appeared, and manuscripts actually got finished. A whole society functioned on the same slow drip of wax. A delightful curiosity. Though some abbeys actually kept different-sized candles for different routines. A shorter one for a short service. A taller monster for long vigils. Almost like having a specialized playlist. 30-minute candle for Vespers. 90-minute candle for feast prep. The monks invented shuffle and repeat without even noticing. Asterisk, and still, Historians raise a lingering debate. Did every monk find it comforting? Or did some stew in frustration when wax burned unevenly, cutting rest hours much too short? We'll never really know. One thing is certain: you, trailing behind them with your 21st century impatience tucked under your robe, probably wouldn't thrive. Your urge to check your phone every 5 minutes would clash badly with a candle's slow-burning persuasion. Asterisk. You pause now in the cloister once more, the square walkway wrapping a peaceful little garden. Monks move quietly around you, like ships on a gentle tide. Every glance, every gesture seems attuned not to the stars or fancy clocks but to the humbler authority of candles. The stone arches cast long silhouettes, stretching like sleepy sentinels across the path. Somewhere a bird calls into the night, ignored or perhaps embraced as just another sound folded into candle time. Asterisk. The rhythm of their days has begun to infect you. You find yourself subconsciously matching your steps to the idea of wax disappearing inch by inch. Not rushed, not dragging, just flowing evenly forward. If you had to, you could live by this pace for some time, a life where each moment melts invisibly, yet leaves behind soft light until the last flicker. Asterisk. So, as you lean against a pillar and watch monks vanish toward their cells and chapels, you realize these brothers have mastered something profound. They don't fight time. They mark it, honor it, flow with it always, with patience, and always with a flame. The evening deepens, hushed in amber, and you find yourself drifting toward a narrower doorway. A muted scratching sound leaks from inside, rhythmic and almost soothing. When you step carefully across the threshold, the air thickens with mustiness, ink, and the faint whiff of melting wax. You've entered the scriptorium, the monastery's quiet factory of words. If the courtyard was a clock, and the fields were a heartbeat, this room is its mind scribbling away into the night under weary candlelight. Asterisk. Rows of desks stretch across the room, each equipped with quills trimmed from unlucky geese and little sand-filled ink. Flat stones and blotting cloths hold parchment pages down, but it's the candles that dominate your perception. They flicker, stubbornly illuminating the careful strokes of scripture and margin doodles you know, the kind where a serious monk suddenly draws a mischievous rabbit in the corner. Asterisk. Here you see a record of candle clocks actually in action. While monks copied manuscripts, the wax burned at its steady pace, marking deadlines invisible, yet unavoidable. Historians have noted that monks believed proper lighting wasn't just convenience, it was sacred necessity. Without light, copying would slow or falter. Candles were more than tools. They were guardians of wisdom, as much bibliographers as they were clocks. That candle dripping next to you, it's basically the unsung editor ensuring the work doesn't drift too far into overtime. Asterisk. As your eyes adjust, you notice smudges on pages from sleepy hands brushing ink, tiny corrections to words, minuscule illuminations shining with gold leaf. Candles make shadows dance across the margins, giving every decorative vine and halo a life of its own. The world outside is dark by now, but in here, the soft hum of quills on parchment feels louder than the wind. One monk yawns a long, jaw-cracking stretch, but he dutifully goes on writing, while the candle burns another inch. The flame droops slightly to one side, its wax curling softly down, but nobody panics. They just glance at it with confidence, as if even exhaustion knows when to stop, because the wax will tell them when enough is enough. A curious fact worms its way into your thoughts. Some monasteries actually had rules about book quotas, the number of pages a monk might need to finish in a week. Candles effectively acted like supervisors. A tall taper set beside a workspace could define the copy shift. When the wax ran down to a certain point, the workday was done. Congratulations! You just had your first performance review, conducted entirely by a lump of honeycomb. Somehow gentler than a corporate memo, don't you think? Asterisk. At the same time, the room is wonderfully imperfect. You imagine wax dripping right onto valuable text, leaving golden freckles on words meant to endure centuries. Some books today still bear those marks. They're like fossilized moments of timekeeping, teeny waxy signatures from monks who long since fell asleep in their own prayer stalls. Asterisk. Historians still wonder about the atmosphere here. Was it always so serene? Or did frustration creep in when fatigue made flames flicker too frequently? Did monks gossip in hushed tones about Brother Matthew's tendency to spill candles scorch onto psalms? We can't know, but one thing is clear. Without these humble candles, much of the Middle Ages might have vanished into darkness. What libraries had by daylight, monasteries preserved by flame, bits of Aristotle, Roman law, herbal remedies, and epic tales all quietly surviving because someone trusted melting wax to buy them just enough light to keep scribbling. Asterisk. And here's your slightly humorous realization. You are sitting in the world's first late-night study hall. Except there is no pizza delivery, no energy drink cans. Just a monk hunched over parchment and a stubborn flame feeding him minutes like breadcrumbs. If you're feeling guilty over your own procrastination habits, take comfort. Monks had wax doing their time management for them, which makes modern productivity apps seem like overachieving overkill. Asterisk. The smell changes yet again. Heated beeswax blends with ink's bitter temps. If you breathe slowly, you'd swear you're inhaling the centuries themselves. Medieval discipline wrapped in roasted honey. The shadows curl across the walls with deceptive playfulness, exaggerating the weary faces of the monks in long, flickering outlines like a shadow puppet theater putting on a silent, eternal play. Asterisk. You lean a little deeper against one cold wall, watching as a young monk scratches out another page. His candle burns neatly, and every so often his glance flicks over as if to ask, how many psalms can I copy before this notch goes? And sure enough, time moves forward, not by minutes, but by lines of ink and melting wax. For them, measuring hours isn't about squeezing productivity, it's about serving a rhythm greater than themselves. Asterisk. The truth is, candle clocks weren't perfect companions. They occasionally smoked and warped, making an hour's worth of burning fly by in half the time or creep at snail speed. Yet the monks accepted these limitations with grace. Accuracy was a luxury they didn't require. The candle clock wasn't about obedience to minutes. It was about obedience to life's larger rhythm. Pray, work, rest, copy, breathe. Asterisk. Your eyes soften against the glow of parchment. You realize you're already blending into the calmness of this place. No alarms demand your attention, only wax vanishing steadily, effortlessly. It's wiser than any to-do list. Steady, flickering, slightly uneven, but reliable enough to keep everyone in motion, one chant and one page at a time. The scriptorium's quiet fades behind you, and once again you step into the monastery's hushed corridors, where the waxy glow is the real ruler. You begin to notice something that your modern nose can't ignore: the smell of time. Here, time doesn't tick, it wafts. Each burning candle is essentially an olfactory clock, its scent drifting into cloisters, kitchens, and chapels in steady waves. You pause, breathing deeply, realizing that in this monastery, remembering the hour means remembering the aroma hanging in the air. Asterisk. The beeswax warms to a soft sweetness, like honey simmering at the edge of caramel, but never quite tipping over into dessert. It mingles with other smells: leather from shoes stacked at the chapel door, slightly singed wool from habits brushed against flame, the earthy perfume of damp stone. Combine those together, and every hour has its own signature fragrance. While your modern day might be organized by smartphone notifications, monastic time was divided by nasal cues, gently reminding you, yes, evening has arrived, or, this must be the midnight office, because it smells faintly of scorched wick. Asterisk. It's remarkable to think that this is how people actually unfolded their day. Candles weren't just neutral objects. They brought a presence, filling each space with light and scent that bled into memory. You imagine a monk later smelling beeswax in a village and instantly recalling a particular psalm cycle. Smell is timekeeping. It's strangely poetic, if not the most efficient system. At the very least, it beats the beep of your alarm clock that jolts you awake like a medieval knight attacking your dreams. Asterisk. Here's a delightful little fact. Beeswax was so prized in many parts of medieval Europe that it was taxed and controlled, much like silk or salt. Villages specialized in keeping hives not just for honey, but for wax destined for abbeys and churches. A monastery that could afford beeswax signaled importance, wealth, and devotion. In poorer regions, tallow replaced wax, leaving behind a smell historians describe politely as lingering. You'd describe it more honestly as someone cooked old stew and decided to burn it. Not exactly dreamy bedside material. Asterisk still. Even plain beeswax had quirks. Set too close to drafts, its flame sputtered, giving off an acrid smoky note that ruined the otherwise soothing perfume. Too much heat, and the wax burned unevenly, dripping into puddles far faster than expected. The monks may have been patient, but you just know, at least one of them grimaced whenever a carefully measured hour vanished too quickly in a smoky failure. You can almost hear him mutter, "There goes Compline 30 minutes early, thanks to Brother Wind." Asterisk historians continue to wonder, did the smell matter more than the accuracy? Was spiritual life encouraged by the sensory landscape, with candles creating a texture to the day that clocks never could? The debate never really finds a resolution, but here, standing barefoot on stones that feel like cold bread, you sense the truth doesn't need solving. The fragrance alone makes the moment whole. Asterisk. Monastic routines didn't just happen to exist alongside the smell, they were infused by it. You wander into the kitchen, and the contrast is immediate. Here, herbs, onions, and yeast dominate the air, pressing against the wax's gentleness. The candle near the doorway somehow merges with this medley, morphing into a reminder. Meal hour is almost done. Later, when monks return to chapel, the beeswax wraps them once more, restoring the mood of sacred order. Asterisk. At some point, you catch yourself smiling at the absurdity. If I worked here, you think, I'd know the hour, not by bells, but by whether the monastery smells like heavenly honey or like goat stew. And maybe that's the secret genius. You'd never lose your sense of place or of time, because the nose insists on tracking it for you. Nostalgia literally hovers in the air. Asterisk. There's one more little curiosity. Some scholars have discovered wax fragments that suggest candles were sometimes infused with herbs or resins. Not on purpose for relaxation, at least not like your lavender candles at home, but probably because wax was collected alongside other plants. Still, it makes you wonder, did a monk ever find himself unusually reflective at prayer because the wax smelled faintly of rosemary? Maybe the scriptorium produced its most creative doodles on nights when time accidentally crept into the wax pot. Asterisk. Either way, you find yourself slowing down to breathe deeper, matching your own inhalations to the lazy rhythm of smoke coils above the flames. The smell doesn't jolt or alarm, it lulls, like incense accidentally swapped for a bedtime snack. The monastery stretches around you, stone walls glowing faint and golden, while the air quietly insists, inhale patience, exhale hurry. Asterisk. In this moment, you realize that the smell of time burning isn't just poetic whimsy, it's literal. Each fading inch of wax is a clock made of fragrance, and though no one here can measure seconds precisely, everyone somehow knows exactly when they are. The candlelight follows you like a loyal pet as you step into a smaller chamber where a few brothers are discussing wax quality. The air here smells richer, like sweetened air blown straight out of the hive. But soon a new odor joins the room, sharper, smokier, heavier. Someone has just lit a tallow candle, and the difference is immediate. Your nose twitches. Ah, yes, here it is. the medieval version of cheap perfume. Asterisk, this is where you learn the truth. Not all candles were equal. Beeswax was the velvet standard, clean, long-lasting, fragrant, and frankly rather expensive. Monasteries with wealth or strong ties to local beekeepers could afford to fill their chapels with pure, glowing beeswax. The rest of Europe, they often made do with tallow, which is another way of saying they burned animal fat. You don't need to be a historian to know that setting fire to beef leftovers fills a room with, let's call it, robust earthiness. Asterisk, try picturing this contrast. One wing of the monastery bathed in golden beeswax glow, soft fragrance floating in the air, a monk quietly reflecting on eternity. Another wing lit by sputtering lumps of tallow, exuding smoke and smell so strong it competes with the sermon. You might say one smells of holiness, the other of last night's stew. Asterisk and testy, fun fact. Tallow candles didn't just smell peculiar, they were smoky, messy, and left greasy residue on walls and ceilings. You glance upward, noticing black streaks across the beams here, as though flames have been misbehaving. Ordinary villagers, of course, often relied almost entirely on these cheap, animal fat lumps. In taverns or cottages, the air would be equally thick with cheer, mud, and the smell of tallow splitting apart. Asterisk, the beeswax tallow divide was more than about scent. It was deeply symbolic. Beeswax represented purity. In church sermons, the bee's labor was often compared to virginity. Bees supposedly didn't reproduce the normal way. A charming but incorrect medieval theory. So their wax symbolized unsullied devotion. Meanwhile, tallow, common, unholy, and a little smelly. Priests often warned against it for sacred purposes, preferring pure beeswax in liturgy. This explains why monasteries hoarded hives like libraries hoarded books. Asterisk, of course. We're left wondering, which monk made the decision? Did abbots hold meetings over candle budgets? Picture a medieval debate. Brothers, do we splurge on bees this year, or do we hold fast with old Bessie's leftovers? History doesn't tell us. But the soot-streaked stones in modest abbeys whisper. The verdict, they went with Bessie's economy pack. Asterisk, you, perhaps growing less pious and more amused, can't help but wonder what bedtime here smelled like. Would you drift off in a tiny monk cell, dreaming of honeycomb and summer fields, or choking politely on the fumes of liquefied cow? Probably depended on how generous your monastery's purse had been that harvest season. Asterisk. And here comes another quirky detail. Beeswax wasn't just cleaner, it was brighter. A beeswax flame burns steady and golden, while tallow flickers a dirtier orange, spitting sparks at times. That meant even perception itself, the very look of sacred space, depended on resources. Rich monasteries glowed with clarity. Poorer chapels flickered in shadows, like movies with bad lighting. Asterisk, historians still puzzle over the economic side of it. Was access to beeswax more about wealth, or more about political power, with trading routes? The debate lingers, because some tiny abbeys in rural France somehow boasted extraordinary beeswax supplies, while sizable abbeys nearby stuck with smoky fat. Perhaps monks were just extremely persuasive with local beekeepers, or perhaps there's a lost tale of candle smuggling we'll never uncover. Asterisk. Stepping closer to one of the better candles, a proud beeswax taper, shining like liquid gold, you inhale deeply again. Yes, this is why monks cherished it. This smell isn't just pleasant, it's calming, nearly trance-inducing. Combined with long chanting sessions, the warm light and faint honey fragrance were as close to therapy as medieval Europe could get. The difference between beeswax and tallow here isn't just economics. It's atmosphere, serenity, soul. Asterisk, the irony, of course, is that today both would horrify your smoke detector. Imagine explaining to a medieval monk why your home sets off alarms when you merely seek a little ambience. He'd raise his candle in shock and say, "Your walls forbid wax. How do you know when to sleep?" But here, in your medieval role, there are no alarms, just a hierarchy carved in wax and fat, where purity triumphs in honey-sweet chapels and smoky compromise lingers in poorer corners. And somehow, despite the inequality, every flame still managed to do the same thing, transform darkness into a temporary holy hour measured in melting inches. So as you leave the chamber, a faint sniff still caught in your nose, you appreciate the irony. In this monastery, your sense of time doesn't just glot smells one way or another. You move from the monastery's quiet halls out into the chilly night air, following the faint shuffle of sandals and the murmuring of a few brothers heading toward the gate. Beyond the cloister walls lies the village, softer and less disciplined, but still strangely entangled with the rhythm of time, dictated by waxor sometimes. Its absence. Your feet crunch along a dirt path until the lights of Wat Landaub cottages appear ahead, their thatched roofs sagging sleepily. Smoke curls from chimney holes. Here, unlike the beeswax sanctuaries of the monastery, tallow candles are a rare luxury. Instead, villagers tell the hour by burning logs in the hearth, or sometimes by smoldering rushlights, long strips of dried reed dipped in animal fat. They're crude, yes, and they sputter unevenly, like a cousin of the candle who only comes to family reunions to cause trouble. Stepping into one cottage, you notice the central hearth throwing more light than any flame stuck in a holder. The family sits around it, bowls of pottage warming their hands, shadows fluttering across the walls. A single small rushlight, fixed in a clamp, adds a poor attempt at supplementary glow. It's inclined awkwardly, dripping fat onto the floor. The smell is no beeswax perfume, it's sharp, acrid, the scent of supper that overstayed its welcome. Still, this is how villagers lived. Time measured not by smooth increments on carved wax, but by whether the fire consumed a stick fully before bed. The difference between abbey and village is palpable, even in how both approach night. The monks, meticulously slicing hours into candle-marked vigil and prayer. The villagers, more casual, glancing at the fire and saying, "Well, when this log's gone, we'd best tuck in." Both systems are imprecise, but to each community, they function perfectly because precision isn't the heartbeat of survival, adaptability is. And here comes a gem of historical truth. Many medieval peasants rose and slept in multiple chunks, without reliable alarm clocks or calendar precision. They often practiced first sleep and second sleep. A villager might snore until midnight, then wake for an hour chatting, praying, nibbling leftovers before nodding back into second sleep. This segmented pattern was most practical when timekeeping was guided by embers and candles, which naturally broke the night into digestible halves. Imagine humming into the firelight between naps, while the monastery nearby chanted their midnight prayers under beeswax glow. Different lives, same moon, lit by different fires. You step back outside, noticing the contrast more strongly now. From beyond the walls, the chapel windows shimmer faint gold, tall beeswax tapers glowing as quiet celestial companions. In the village, fires spit red embers, turning thatched roofs orange for a heartbeat before darkness swallows them again. This separation between wealth and poverty, sacred and secular, high devotion and hearth, survival, it rests most vividly in how they measured hours. One crowd watched neat candle marks sink. The other squinted at sparks and guessed. And yet, there is unity, too, when roosters crow, monks and villagers both rise. When shadows stretch long, each group winds down. Everyone, in essence, shared one vast sky clock above them. And while the monastery's wax lines prioritized order, the villagers' hearthstones prioritized flexibility. Neither is wrong. Both preserved life. A curious tidbit for you. Some wealthier villagers, desperate to rise above the smoky fate of tallow, would mix their tallow with crumbs of beeswax, creating hybrid candles. They didn't smell much better, but they lasted a tad longer and flickered less. This tiny compromise earned them whispered nicknames: half-pure flames yearning for the monastery standard. You chuckle at the thought of ambitious peasants trying to fashion their candles into social ladders of light. Asterisk. Historians pose an open question here. Did peasants envy the monastery's golden glow? Or did they shrug, satisfied with their humble hearths? Records rarely reveal emotions of the poor. Perhaps they'd seen monks shiver barefoot at midnight prayers and thought, "Ah, let them keep their bees. I'll take my warm bed." You'll never know for certain. All you can do is wander between the two, inhaling stews, hearth smoke, and the faint honey fragrance wafting through chapel windows. Asterisk. You pause on the dirt road between village and abbey, feeling both atmospheres at once, the golden hum of prayer candles in the distance, and the rustic crackle of villager logs behind you. Somehow, standing between these worlds feels truer than belonging fully to either. Both glow with their own fire, both melt hours patiently. You just need to listen for the hum of wax, or the sigh of embers, to know which story you're in. Asterisk. So, you stroll slowly back toward the monastery gate, thinking about the strange democracy of light, even in wildly different forms. This fragile glow of flame rules everyone, equally quietly reminding you that no matter where you're placed, time always burns down one drip, one spark, one curl of smoke at a time. You're back within the walls of the monastery now, padding softly down a corridor paved with stones that always seem to be colder than your feet would prefer. The bells have rung again, low and deliberate, like the world's slowest heartbeat, guiding everyone toward the chapel. This is when you notice something curious. Every sound, every breath, is calibrated not by some sundial outside or rooster crowing from a barnyard, but by a candle flame shrinking in quiet dignity. Asterisk. The brothers gather. Bare sandals scuff along the flagstones as the procession forms. The chapel's air hangs heavy with incense, not overbearing. Just a faint, piney sweetness and, of course, the ever-present undertone of beeswax, that faithful operator of ours. A tall candle has just been lit, carefully scored with lines. Its job is simple. Remind 30 men when to sing. Asterisk. You settle into a wooden bench. The timber groans in sympathy with your weight. From your vantage point you can see the wax already softening near its base, drips descending like tiny golden tears. A monk strikes the opening note, and suddenly the space hums with measured voices. The singing isn't upbeat. It doesn't need to be. It stretches long and plain, syllables floating like mist, out of sync with your modern sense of tempo, yet perfectly in step with candle time. Asterisk. Here lies one of the documented details of medieval practice. Psalms were deliberately linked to increments of flame. If 12 lines of wax equaled 4 hours, then each psalm cycle conveniently warranted a drip or two. Monks didn't count beats with knuckles on their desks like impatient drummers. They trusted wax to keep them honest. Eventually one candle segment gave out, and voices moved seamlessly into the next pray-roar, into silence. Depending on what the schedule required, that quiet, steady rhythm gave the monastery a sense of cosmic order, as though the divine itself had dipped the wicks. Asterisk. And yet, amid all this solemnity, you feel the inevitable quirkiness of the system. What happens if a draft rushes in through a side door, pushing the flame to burn unevenly? The monks would still sing loyally to its tempo, meaning one night's prayers might end briskly. Another night they might stretch into eternity. You hide a smile behind your sleeve. Spiritual discipline is one thing, but singing 2/3 more psalms than expected because someone left a window ajar, that's medieval overtime at its finest. Asterisk. Still, the candle was far more than practical coordination. For monks, wax had profound symbolism: time itself burning as offering, light representing soul, flame revealing darkness to be less frightening. So when each chant lined up to the candle strip, it wasn't just a clock. It felt like participating in the slow marriage of earthly schedules and heavenly mysteries. Every disappearing notch was a reminder of life's fragility, a whisper that even your hours here might one day flicker toward their end. Poignant. Yes, also slightly unnerving if you're just here hoping for a nap. A delightful twist comes from a lesser-known tidbit. In some monasteries, the chanting at candle intervals wasn't solely prayer. Occasionally, practical announcements or reminders were slotted into the rhythm. Things like instructions about harvest timing or sending word to a nearby village might pop up between psalmsby. 'Cause if you're all already gathered and timing yourselves by a candle, why not multitask? You picture a solemn monk intoning gravely, "The Lord is my shepherd, and Brother Bernard needs to fix the roof tomorrow morning." But here, in this chapel, no interruptions occur. The candle's steady flame convinces everyone that music alone is enough. The wax shrinks steadily, shadows dancing across the carved wooden stalls, igniting faces into a dreamscape of glowing chins and hidden expressions. The sound shivers against the stone arches. It is both eternal and fleeting eternal, because the same cycle repeats nightly. Fleeting, because the wax insists the moment too will pass. Historians still debate how strictly these transitions were enforced. Were monks tapping their feet anxiously if the wax was slow, eager to head off to rest? Or did they truly surrender, following flame exactly as it was given? You'll never know. But tonight, as you watch them stand, bow, and sit in rhythm with a piece of honeycomb carved with lines, you feel the strange serenity of a life measured not by machines, but by fire. The candle dips lower. One notch has vanished. The voices pause, drifting gracefully into silence. They bow their heads, listening again for what time the flame suggests to them. Somewhere faintly, you begin to feel your own shoulders slacken into their rhythm. This isn't just their time anymore, it's becoming yours. So you sigh softly, soothed, while the candle burns down its next segment. Your mind traces the wax's slow collapse into liquid, one drip perfectly aligned with another. Here, in this cloister of quiet devotion, you no longer care what modern hour it is. Your time is tethered entirely to a candle's patient tears and chants that seem to float forever into the rafters. The chapel grows darker as night takes firmer hold outside, and a sharper chill seeps between the stones. You follow the monks deeper within, toward the heart of discipline, the midnight office. That stubborn ritual of rising from bed when decent people should be dreaming. A tall candle burns faithfully near the altar, its notches already halfway spent, guiding sleepy bodies back into prayer. You stand in the back, watching the brothers shuffle in, ropes of their habits swinging at their ankles. Some rub their eyes. Others carry themselves with serene inevitability, as if midnight is no stranger, but a dirif, slightly inconvenient. The benches creak as they sit, a whisper in the immense stillness. Then voices blend softly again, and the flickering flame paints their faces pale gold. It's no ordinary flame here. A candle lit for the midnight office wasn't always just a timekeeping tool, it was armor against the fear of darkness. In the Middle Ages, night carried an aura of mystery and unease. Villagers muttered of spirits or thieves out beyond the doors. Here in the monastery, one modest flame held vast symbolic power, steadying hearts, reminding eyes that, even at the deepest hour of darkness, there was still a light to cling to. You catch the smell, again honey, wood smoke, faint woolen. You find yourself oddly comforted that if you had lived here, you'd have the same night routine as kings and peasants alike. Wake in the dead of night, guided by fire, to spend an hour in watchfulness. Strangely enough, it's not dissimilar to your 2 a.m. scroll through unread messages. The monks just scrolled prayer beads instead. Historical records tell us this midnight, Ritual called asterisk matins asterisk or asterisk vigils asterisk was among the most grueling observances. To modern ears, it sounds harsh. Imagine pulling yourself from dreamland, striking a match, and trudging into stone-cold darkness because wax insisted your hour had arrived. And yet, for monks, this was central. Each chant tethered them closer to heaven. The candle was a gentle supervisor, not a harsh alarm, guiding them into devotion with a softened, golden command. Asterisk, you trace the flame with your eyes, noticing how the wax bends like a drooping shoulder under its own weight. The idea that you could time entire nights this way feels absurd by modern standards, yet incredibly human. There's something freeing in surrendering to the candle at midnights, something you begrudgingly admire, even as you imagine your 21st century self grumbling over the unfairness of a 12 o'clock a.m. staff meeting. Asterisk, and then, a quirk. Some monasteries reportedly used multiple candles in succession, one extinguished, another lit to cover the long arc of night prayer. Occasionally these overlapped, confusing dozing monks about when one service ended and the next began. You imagine Brother Thomas accidentally repeating 2 psalms because the second candle started an hour faster than the first. These hiccups didn't ruin the solemnity, they added to it. Small reminders that clocks built from fire are ultimately whimsical by nature. Asterisk. Historians still ask whether everyone really rose willingly at midnight. Did some monks sneak glances at the flickering candle and groan inwardly? Perhaps we could let the flame drift a little longer before chanting. Were the devout always eager, or occasionally rebellious sleepers? We may never know. What we do have are records of abbots chastising brothers for missing vigils, which is as close as you'll get to proof that even holiness sometimes prefers a full night's rest. Asterisk, the service continues. Low chanting fills the vast space like waves washing over stone. The flame above the altar dances, stretching shadows so high they tower like ancient familiars against the ceiling vaults. You feel the rhythm seeping into your bones, equal parts hypnotic and lulling. For once, you almost understand the appeal of leaving your bed in the dead of night, if only for the beauty of watching a silent, humble candle stand guard. Asterisk, as wax slips lower through another notch. The monks bow as one body, then file out slowly, quietly. The night resumes its deeper silence, but now it feels less empty, less frightening. You remain still for a while longer, hypnotized. The world outside may be wild fields and whispering wolves, but in a pool of golden glow, trays of dripping wax, air dense with sweetness and humility, time belongs wholly to this one candle. And though you're slightly drowsy, you sense that somehow, you've learned the meaning of peace measured by flame. Asterisk, the monastery has quieted again after midnight, but you're not finished wandering. Somewhere down another passage, a sound breaks the silence, not chanting, not bells, but something that clangs faintly, almost playfully. You follow it through the hall, and discover a quirkier corner of monastic ingenuity. The strange experiments where candles tried to evolve into machines. Asterisk, here, a long table is scattered with curious contraptions. One candle, half burned, has a tiny metal weight embedded inside. As the wax melts, the weight tumbles free, dropping into a little brass tray with a clean asterisk ting. Asterisk, the monks, nearby glance at it, nod sagely, then return to their work, as if their candle has politely announced, "Time's up. Thank you. Class dismissed." Asterisk. This is one of those lesser-known details you rarely consider. Candles weren't always passive tickers of time. Some were designed to asterisk do asterisk something. A documented experiment from various monasteries, and even noble households, involved sticking nails or metal balls into measured intervals of wax. As the candle dripped, the metal piece eventually fell, clattering loudly enough to wake or alert someone. Congratulations, you've basically invented the medieval alarm clock. Alarm, of course. being defined loosely as a loud thunk in the middle of the night that convinces you doom has fallen. Asterisk. You hold one of these peculiar inventions in your hand. The wax is smooth except for the tiny bumps of hidden weights inside. There's a dry humor in it. Imagine being woken at 3 a.m. by a lump of iron plinking onto a tray beside your head, courtesy of a candle with a sense of dramatic timing. Who needs snooze when the wax gives you no choice? Asterisk. Even more experimental minds created candles tied with strings connected to levers. As the wax melted the string, a small object would drop or shift. One contraption reportedly made a tiny bell ring. Another could spill a pebble onto the floor. These were whimsical prototypes, far from standardized, but they show just how imaginative time could become when you gave fire a job description. Asterisk. And yet, historians puzzle. How widespread were these devices? Were they singular clever toys, or popular household gadgets? Written records are sparse. Perhaps monks guarded their little experiments with pride, showing them to visitors like magicians, unveiling tricks. Or perhaps they were niche inventions quickly abandoned when winds ruined their reliability. A debate we'll never properly resolve, but amusing to imagine all the same. Asterisk. The fun doesn't end there. Across the table, another brother demonstrates a taper inscribed with numbers and symbols. Each level corresponds not just to an hour, but to a task. When the wax reached the third mark, perhaps it was time for a certain reading. At the fourth, maybe a reminder to feed animals in the stables. The candle doubled as planner and timepiece, a medieval day scheduler, minus the stickers and productivity podcasts. Asterisk. Naturally, all of this has its flaws. One candle burned unpredictably, and the whole schedule wobbled like a novice dancer. Wind, uneven wax, even insects hovering too close could foil the neat plan. Still, the monks seemed unfazed. You picture them tinkering with these creations in the off hours, smiling faintly at both the ideas and their ridiculous unpredictability. Asterisk. The air in this space smells heavily of iron and melted wax, sharper than the cozy chapel. Time here isn't spiritual or poetic. It feels mechanical. Early steps toward a future of worry gears and ticking cogs. Some candles sputter, with nails halfway revealed, like secrets waiting to clink into being. The workshop is a mix of invention and comedy, not unlike a medieval episode of Shark Tank. Hello, brothers. I present to you the candle that rings bells while you nap. Asterisk. You wonder, did some monks roll their eyes? Historical imagination nods. Surely, for every excited tinkerer, there was a grumpy brother muttering, "Wax is for prayer, not for rattling my ears." Did inventors dream that one day, whole towns would have ringing clocks on towers, all born from these half-serious experiments? Maybe, maybe not, but history often starts with humble steps and a clatter on a brass tray. Asterisk. The candle on the table finally drops its next weight. Asterisk. Ting. Asterisk. The sound rises sharp and cheerful in the night, echoing down the hallway just long enough to wake one unsuspecting rooster outside, who crows indignantly before realizing it's not actually his turn. You smile to yourself. Even experiments, however rough, deserved applause for effort. In this cloistered little world, cleverness burned right alongside faith, both measured by wax, one drip at a time. The night lingers on, and though the chapel flame still glows steadily in your memory, you find yourself wandering back into the quieter cloisters, where the rhythm feels slightly wobbly. This is where you begin to notice something monks tolerated all too often: candle clocks failing. Asterisk. It's understandable. Of course, candles weren't built for scientific precision. Wax is temperamental. Humidity, drafts, the thickness of the wick, even how clean the molds whirl of it, could make time unravel noisily, or sag into silence. On more than one occasion in monastic history, the schedule was less divine rhythm, and more oops. Compline came 30 minutes early. Asterisk. You pause at a small wooden stand, where a candle leans uncertainly, dripping down one side like an overstretched yogi. Its flame wavers in a gust of cold air, sneaking through a cracked window. One monk sighs when he sees it. He knows immediately, this hour will not last its intended hour. Within minutes, the wax stumbles and topples, collapsing into a messy puddle that no notch mark could hope to interpret. You think, if this were your bedtime routine, you'd probably oversleep forever, or panic wake at the totally wrong moment. Asterisk fun fact. Records mention how even well-made candles often burned unevenly. A knot in the wick, or a lump in the wax, would cause faster melting in one direction, throwing entire measured hours off balance. Some candles tunneled, eating just their centers and leaving a hollow wax wall like a tiny fortress around the flame. Others drooled puddles onto the floor, skipping notches entirely. Asterisk, now imagine a monk waiting for the candle to burn to the next marker. He's chanting dutifully, his voice stretching thin, when suddenly the wax jumps ahead, gulping down 2 hours worth at once. Suddenly the prayer cycle is misaligned, and everyone blinks at each other like confused choir members. The abbot sighs and nods. Guess we'll end early, brothers. You almost laugh. Even their spiritual life had technical glitches. The medieval version of your Wi-Fi dropping during a Zoom call. Asterisk, of course. Redundancy kicked in. Candles were not the sole keepers of time. Bells, constellations, even human instinct reinforced the rhythms. Still, the charm here is too rich. A solemn monastery, running partly on honeycomb mood lighting prone to melting disasters. Asterisk, there's also a curiosity. Some monks reportedly complained privately in writings about improper measurements by candle. They knew their system wasn't perfect. It made you wondered, the failings irritate them deeply, or simply amuse? Were monks chuckling in their sleeves as a candle sputtered through its hours, giving them an unexpected early bedtime? One man's flawed timekeeper is another man's cozy nap. Historians still ask how much discipline these failures disrupted, or whether life simply flowed around them, accepting imperfection as part of existence. Asterisk nearby. You notice another candle whose wick is just too thick. Its flame leaps in wild arcs, bold and arrogant. Sparks spit onto the floor. The monk tending it swiftly trims the wick with tiny iron scissors, nodding with satisfaction as the flame calms back down. Their vigilance in managing whimsy feels both deeply practical and faintly comical, like babysitting a fiery toddler. Asterisk. The smell here reinforces the sense of imperfection. Instead of the steady, sweet scent of beeswax, the air reeks faintly of scorched linen from burnt cloth wicks. Time smells wrong when the candle misbehaves, and everyone knows it. One monk passing by pinches his nose just slightly, his expression wry, like even he's admitting this candle's performance review was subpar. Asterisk, and yet, through all these little fiascos, the rhythm kept moving. Whether too fast, too short, smoky, or sputtering, monks still prayed. The idea wasn't perfection, it was continuity. They weren't scientists racing for decimal accuracy. They were human beings, surrendering their time to natural materials, knowing full well the materials occasionally rebelled, almost as if the imperfection itself became part of the devotion. Asterisk, in the flickering light and occasional smoke, you sense something cozy in this unpredictability. When clocks fail today, people panic. Missed trains, bungled appointments, crises of efficiency. Here, if time faltered, you simply shrugged, sang fewer psalms, and trusted the sun would rise on schedule. Anyway, there was no such thing as time lost. The wax had the last word, even if its handwriting was incomprehensible. Asterisk, the candle before you coughs its last sputter, collapsing sideways with an undignified hiss. The monk winces but doesn't curse. He just replaces it with another, sets the wick upright, and moves on. Time failed, yes, but then, time resumed, just as easily, with another flame. And really, Isn't that the comforting heart of the story? You can always light a new candle and start over. Asterisk, asterisk. The failed candle's smoke curls away behind you as you step into another corridor, where time feels more like a museum of human creativity. It's here you realize something important. Candles, though beloved, weren't the only game in town. Monasteries and medieval folk in general tinkered with multiple ways to tame the flow of hours. None were quite as cozy as wax, but all had their quirks. Asterisk, the first you notice is the familiar sundial. A small one leans in the cloister garden, half hidden in the long grass, smugly useless at night. In daylight though, these stone or wooden devices reigned supreme. Make no mistake, they weren't precise either. Clouds, rain, and the occasional curious goat could ruin their effectiveness. Yet for centuries, shadows on carved lines taught monks roughly when to eat, pray, or get back to hoeing onions. Compared to the warm, flickering candle, a sundial feels brutally strict its authority, a bright slash of sunlight that says, "I'll give you one shadow, take it or leave it." Asterisk, further in, you cross paths with a water clock, an elegant little contraption left gurgling softly in a corner. A jar drips steadily into a lower basin, each drop like an elongated heartbeat. These clepsydras were used in ancient Greece and Rome, and in scattered parts of medieval Europe too. Very poetic, time literally flowing, trickling itself away, but again unreliable in freezing winters, or when monks forgot to keep the jug topped up. You imagine Brother Peter sleepily stumbling past, muttering. The clock ran dry again, while everyone else sighs into their porridge. Asterisk then, delightfully, an hourglass. A sand-filled relic rests on a shelf, looking suspiciously modern to your eyes. But in monasteries, hourglasses were rarer than you think, partly because they were fragile, pricey, and more nautical in heritage. Ship captains adored them, but in abbeys, less so. Still, they carried a charm. Watching sand fall, grain by grain, is not so different from watching candle wax drip. The difference is, an hourglass doesn't make your room smell like honey or smoke. Less romantic, more practical. Asterisk, so why did candles endure here? That's the thought curling in your mind as you walk the hall. Sundials were bossy but limited. Water clocks required constant maintenance, and hourglasses were delicate. Candles, for all their uneven burns and melodramatic habits, worked at asterisk, night asterisk. That was their ace card. They conquered darkness, something none of their rivals managed with equal simplicity. Asterisk A. Lesser-known curiosity catches your ear. Some monasteries used oil lamps with float gauges. Picture olive oil in a bowl, a tiny floating device inside with marks to gauge levels as the oil burned. Practical, inexpensive, but drippy, smoky, messier than wax, and far less portable. Oil is awkward in glassless windows where breezes constantly threaten. Candles proved steadier companions, balancing between light, transport, and symbolic poetry. Asterisk historians, of course, debate which other system was most reliable. Some argue water clocks, properly maintained, were superior. Others insist sundials trained an orderly discipline tied to the cosmos itself. But none argue about candles' dominance in the sheer asterisk coziness department. Asterisk, they were the ones monks leaned toward when they wanted to merge usefulness with beauty. Asterisk, for you standing here, the choice feels obvious. Hourglasses are clinical. Sundials are aloof, fancy cousins who only work outdoors. Water clocks gurgle too anxiously. But candles speak softly, scent the air, and flicker at you like friends. Watching one is like having a companion hum you through the evening, marking time as if it were a lullaby. Asterisk, somewhere down the corridor, you glimpse two candles standing beside a dripping water jar, as if conducting a quiet debate about which system rules. The candle glows warmly. The jar drips insistently. You chuckle. It feels like attending a council of rival timekeepers, where every device is flawed, but each insists on its dignity. And you already know who wins in your sleepy heart. The stone sundial may claim authority, the water clock may scold about refills, but the candle gives you something they never can: soft light, warm scent, a golden flame for wandering thoughts. That's why, imperfect as it was, wax time endured. A drip of honeyed shadow was all that monks ever needed. The air shifts as you wander past the silent cloister and hear a distant clang of bells rolling from a town nearby. The sound feels louder, harsher, and strangely triumphant compared to the gentle hush of monastic flames. You follow the echo until you reach the abbey's tower, and here, the story of time reaches a turning point. The rise of mechanical clocks. The tower itself. Towers, yes. A tower towers unapologetically into the night. It's stone-heavy with an authority that beeswax could never quite muster. A bell hangs above, suspended as if waiting to scold the world. The candle method still lingers downstairs, faithful, dripping into pools of calm. But overhead, brass gears are clanking into existence, cutting time into tidier slices, announcing them with metallic zeal. It's a jarring contrast. Imagine being a monk, lulled for years by the hum of flames, then suddenly being told the hour by a booming iron mouth thundering from above. Historians tell us that from the 13th and 14th centuries, Europe witnessed an arms race of mechanical timekeeping, bell towers sprouting out of towns, their machinery overseen by watchful custodians. Soon enough, candles were less about precision timing and more about atmosphere. Time itself had become public, loud, and, in a way, unavoidable. You can almost hear the monks' debates. Picture Brother John frowning at a new clock tower. That bell is 3 minutes early. I was mid-psalm, and Brother Michael sighing. At least with candles, I didn't jump when time arrived. The candle whispered. The bell tower shouted. Here human lives began adjusting not only to faith's rhythm, but to machinery's insistence. Yet even as the new technology spread, wax refused to leave. The irony, while bells were marvelous at heralding hours en masse, they couldn't light a manuscript, couldn't warm a prayer stall, couldn't lend symbolism to chanting. Towers told people when to pray, but candles still made it possible to see the prayers. In monasteries, the relationship became less adversarial than expected. Bells outside booming with punctual scorn, candles inside glowing in soft rebellion. We'll still keep our rhythm. Thank you very much. A delightful detail here. Some abbeys reportedly hesitated to embrace mechanical clocks, not because they distrusted science, but because they feared losing the contemplative atmosphere candles maintained. After all, candles didn't bark. They hummed. Their time was flexible, fluid, giving room for chance to breathe. A bell tower left no room for poetry. It demanded order. Now, historians still mull over the psychological shift this caused. Before, time felt natural and pliable, guided by wax, sun, wind, or star. After bells and gears arrived, time became harder, sharper, something imposed from without instead of discovered within. Did monks sigh for their dripping companions, or feel grateful for the clarity bells brought? The record stays tantalizingly conflicting. You lean against the cold wall of the tower base and glance both ways, up to the rigid bell clappers poised above, down to a quiet chamber where another candle burns, lines carved neatly down its side. You sense the tension of a changing era. You stand at the threshold of the old and the new, soft wax melting into poetic rhythm, brass teeth gnashing into disciplined seconds. And yet, something inner in you grins. Both systems were deeply flawed. Bells could mistrike, towers could malfunction, gears slip. Meanwhile, candles could tunnel, sputter, or collapse into a puddle. Perfection has never really existed, only preference. Perhaps that's the message monks absorbed. Use what works. Adapt when needed. Trust that prayers still count, whether counted by wax, notch, or brass gear. Asterisk the tower bell thunders once. Your chest vibrates, startled, and down the hall, a candle trembles in its brass holder. The monk beside it looks up, sighs, and keeps writing, as though nothing happened. That flicker sums it up perfectly. Brass and gears may dominate the town, but as long as monks had wax, time would still carry a golden softness inside these walls. Asterisk, and for you, drowsy wanderer, you know which one you'd choose. Bells shout too rudely for sleep. Candles whisper you toward. Dreaming. Asterisk asterisk sectio. Asterisk the bells overhead fade into the distance, their clang swallowed by the vast quiet of night. You return once more through the stone cloisters, pacing softly toward a small chamber lit by a single flame. This, you sense, is the last candle, the one burning its way down through wax, until only stub and smoke remain. And here, you are content to stay, watching time dissolve in the gentlest possible way. Asterisk, the room feels smaller, cozier than the chapels and scriptoriums you've walked before. Its stone walls are close, its air honey-thick, and its silence profound. A solitary monk sits nearby, head tilted in tired reverie, his face shadowed by the wavering flame. He doesn't stir. He doesn't need to. The candle has the shift well in hand. Asterisk, you lean closer, mesmerized by how fragile yet determined the flame becomes near the end of its life. The wax pools at its base, dripping into uneven puddles that shine like melted amber. Every few seconds, the wick leans as if exhausted from even its meager duty, but still it rises, dances again. You'd swear it was telling you, I'm not finished yet. Time is not quite gone. Asterisk, the symbolism is almost too perfect. For the monks, the final length of candle reminded them not only of an hour's passing, but of mortality itself. Each taper was a miniature sermon. Time vanishes, and so do we. Yet, the final flicker wasn't treated with fear, but with peace. After all, the flame didn't vanish into emptiness, it rose into smoke, curling toward heaven. Asterisk, one more historical nugget slips into your memory here. In some ceremonies, the extinguishing of the last candle marked the transition from one vigil to the next, a ritualized surrender. The darkness wasn't frightening, but purposeful, a pause until tomorrow's wax was lit anew, the clock resetting itself, without anyone needing to wind a gear or set an alarm. Asterisk, still, that nagging question persists. How often did monks manage these endings perfectly? Did they always line up prayers beautifully to match the candle's last breath? Or did it sometimes sputter out halfway through a hymn, leaving everyone in awkward silence? Historians admit it surely happened, and perhaps the monks chuckled, shrugged, and said, the flame has spoken, time for bed. Spirituality with a wink of humor, surprisingly human. Asterisk, the faint crackle of dying wick fills the chamber as the flame dips lower and lower. Shadows lengthen absurdly, stretching across walls as if reluctant to vanish. The air grows cooler as warmth departs with the light. You let your own shoulders drop, mimicking the candle's easy surrender. Your breathing has slowed into the same rhythm. Inhale, drip of wax. Exhale, flicker of flame. Asterisk, the light is nearly gone now. The monk beside you lifts his eyes. No frustration there. No sorrow, either only the calm of someone who has seen thousands of nights arrive at this same conclusion. He bows his head gently, fingers folded in his lap, letting the flame finish on its own terms. Asterisk, and you realize something essential. For all your modern ways of knowing the hour, digital alarms, blinking microwaves, phones that buzz until your teeth rattle, none of them carry this poetry. A candle finishes, and you finish with it. There's acceptance, even comfort in the surrender. Time isn't racing you. It simply burns down softly, humming, all is well. Sleep if you need to. Asterisk, the last flame wavers, bows, sighs a final curl, and disappears, leaving a hush that is thicker and deeper than anything before. Darkness doesn't frighten you here. It feels warm, wrapped in layers of beeswax scent, chant echoes, and shadows still glowing in remembered flame. Asterisk, you close your eyes. The last candle has gone, and somehow, you feel no sense of loss. Only the sense that time continues, waiting to be lit again tomorrow. And maybe tonight, that rhythm belongs to you too. Asterisk, now, the story slows. Just as the candle has slowed, as if the flame still lingers in your mind's eye. With no more wax to mark each slip of passing hours, you begin to measure time instead, by your own breathing, in and out, slow and slower still. Asterisk, imagine yourself resting now in that same chapel where the last candle just curled into smoke. The stone walls no longer feel cold, they're gentle, protective, cradling you the way the cloister cradles its garden. Your eyes adjust to the darkness, but when you blink, you can still picture faint golden halos flickering where candles once stood. They're gone, but your memory carries them gently, glowing just enough inside your mind to keep fear away. Asterisk, you drift inward, as monks once did, surrendering not to bells or clocks, but to silence itself. Your body is heavy, but it is good heaviness, the kind that anchors you, softens your muscles, untangles your thoughts. There's no need to hurry. After all, nothing in this monastery ever hurried. Time here has always melted as slowly as wax, and tonight, it melts around you too. Asterisk, the last sound you notice is nothing loud or intrusive, just the soft hum of night, air flowing like invisible water around the old stones. With each breath you take, that air fills your chest with quiet calm. You let it out, slowly, softer still, until your lungs, your arms, your legs, all seem to sigh in relief together. Asterisk, you are entirely safe, now gentle darkness wrapped like an old wool blanket around your shoulders. Candles burn out, chants fade, but rest always returns. And now, it's your turn. You are free to drift wherever your dreams carry you, as softly and steadily as wax melting into silence.